Leaf, one of my newest friends and somebody I can't wait to sit down and talk to. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast. How are you doing today?
Great, and it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's different for me because I usually record first thing in the morning, but since you're clear across the world, I'm doing this later in the night for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's always awkward with the time zones from this part of the world.
My biggest fear with time zones is I'm always going to mess it up and people are going to be waiting for me and I'll forget to show up.
Hmm. Oh, look, it happened to me even this morning. Yeah, it's I don't think the human brain's designed to deal with multiple time zones.
No, no. So I'm excited to hear if orangutans know about time zones, but I'll get to that in a minute, huh?
Yeah, it'd be fantastic.
All right. So Leaf, there's something we like to do to make sure our audience around the world kind of gets to know you behind before we start talking about the stuff of what we do in life. So we have a little
Hmm.
warm up for you, kind of like you'd have in anything else in life. I like to warm you up and get you ready. So are you ready for this warm up?
Yep.
All right, here we go. First question for you. You're only going to get one food the rest of your life. What will Leaf be eating?
Oh, wow. Gee, I think it's burritos.
A lot of flexibility in burritos.
Exactly, yeah, and it's got this, like, complete meal in one, and you can have many different kinds, so you can't go wrong.
All right. Is that a big burritos are popular in Australia?
Well, I mean, we obviously have Mexican restaurants here, and,
Yeah.
Mexican is one of my favorite foods, yeah, so, yeah, we do get them.
All right. Yeah, you can't go wrong. You got so much flexibility. I like that choice. All right. You get to have one superpower. What would your superpower be and what would you want to do with it?
Gee, if I had, one superpower, would be able to connect with every living being, and see through their eyes,
Oh, wow.
and therefore, um, that what I'll do with that is make the world a better, happier place, through truly understanding, the other beings that share our planet.
Wow. Man, I wish I could give you that superpower because I'd love to live in that world.
Mm.
What is a favorite book you go to? Favorite book you read?
Favorite book? My favorite book ever is The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham.
Okay.
Yeah, it follows the protagonist Larry on his journey to, I guess, self discovery and enlightenment, in that kind of wonderful time between World War I and World War II in Europe.
Yeah, interesting. All right, you get to have dinner with one person. They could have passed on or been a historical figure or somebody still with us. Who do you want to have dinner with and what do you want to learn from them?
I think the person I would most like to have dinner with and meet would be Sri Ramana Maharishi, um, an Indian sage who, from the age of 16, never left a single hill and spent his whole life there, but made such an incredible impact. So much so, the great little story is, Mahatma Gandhi, the
Yep.
great leader of the independence movement. His supporters conspired so that he would never meet Ramana because they felt if he met Ramana, he would never leave him. And it would not continue on the independence movement. So this guy was considered so great that even the great man who was leading the independence, he'll defer to this guy, so we better not let him meet.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, that's good stuff. Man, I'm excited to learn from you today, Leaf. And I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to just share your expertise and your passion with us.
No, you're most welcome. Thank you.
I was in getting ready for this, doing some research. Obviously, I stumbled across a lot of stuff on you on YouTube, the Jungle School, and all the work you're doing. But one of the things that I saw that really captivated me was a statement you had. I think it might be on your website or somewhere that says one of your life's missions is to save the last remaining viable ecosystems for orangutans, megafauna, biodiversity, and the humans who share their habitat. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, man, that is so profound. Like that is somebody that knows what they're living for, and
Mm-hmm.
it's for the good of others. How did you get to that point? Like, can you talk to me about the first time you decided like this is where my life direction's going?
Well, I think there's two aspects to it, and I call it the heart and the head. And I believe these two things have to be balanced, like the two wings of a bird. So if you have heart and no intellect, you fly around in circles, and vice versa. So to address the heart aspect to it is the realization that we are one with all living beings, and all living beings matters. And love, real love, is universal. It has no boundaries. Love which is restricted by nation, caste, creed, relationships is very selfishness. And so if we're going to do real good in the world, we have to have a universal love. And so what we need to do is do things which benefit all living creatures. For example, saving rainforests is the most cost-effective thing we do to mitigate climate change. It's the best thing we can do for the future economy of Indonesia. It's the best thing we can do for the indigenous communities, and the best thing we can do with the megafauna and the biodiversity share the forest. And so it doesn't exclude all. Everyone comes along in that umbrella of love to achieve the aim. And I think this is the only way you can have lasting effects, because you leave anybody behind, it will eat away like a cancer and spread back out. You leave one little bit of cancer, you don't deal with it, it'll come out. And that's what happens when we exclude any living being from our compassion and love. The second part is the intellect, or the head. And I would posit that the indiscriminate charity causes more problems in the world than it purports to solve. And as you probably realize, we spend billions on charity, and nothing ever changes. People are still homeless. There's still poverty, and there's still things. And so we have to intelligently apply that love and compassion for all living beings in a way that makes meaningful outcomes. And that's why we're conserving the last remaining viable ecosystems of rainforest. And it has to be the right type, shape, and size, because people may want to plant a tree or conserve a tree, but these ecosystems create their own microenvironment: rainfall, humidity, temperature. And if it's fragmented or the wrong type of shape or size, the ecosystems will environmentally collapse on themselves and go back to a savanna or grasslands. So we have to intelligently apply to have viable ecosystems for the future. Similarly with species such as orangutans, the wonderful, intelligent persons that share our planet. You just can't conserve one or two orangutans, or in small populations, because the population will eventually collapse. So we had to conserve viable populations. And not interesting enough, because like us, they predominantly adapt to the environment through culture, not by natural selection alone. We have to preserve their culture in order for them to survive. And it's bringing all those things together provides, I believe, a holistic and lasting legacy that we can leave behind.
Ah, fascinating. How did you get into this? Did you just wake
Mhm.
up one day and go, I want to be the orangutan whisperer? Like, how did you first, what was that first
Mhm.
encounter like for you?
Well, I always wanted to work with animals, so that was kind of the direction I was going with my university studies, studying zoology, biology. And I had the opportunity to work with 15 orangutans in captivity, and which was wonderful. And luckily, I got no training, no occupational health and safety. So no one told me that they're dangerous. So I just went and had my lunch with them, and then played with them, and got to know them intimately as persons. And then, of course, what I did discover is they're the most intelligent beings shown on the planet, self-aware persons, just as we are, who should live free in the wild in their own cultures. So, and they didn't do too well in captivity, just like humans don't do well in captivity, orangutans don't. So that's my lifelong mission, to help save the orangutans from extinction, because during the time I was working with orangutans, 100,000 have been murdered. And so we're talking about a mass slaughter, a mass murder of these beautiful persons. And also, so it is both this conservation aspect of saving species,
Yeah.
the environmental aspect of saving the environment for the global conservation effort and mitigating climate change, but also there's a humanitarian aspect of ensuring that we don't cause pain and suffering to other self-aware persons that share our planet.
Man. So you say they're self-aware. So they're on, what is the genetic makeup of orangutans? Like 97% the same as us, I believe, something similar to that.
Exactly. The 97% the same as us, but I'd just be cautious there because we as humans, we have this natural arrogance and we go, okay, we're the most intelligent being on the planet. So we can just do a DNA. Closer you are to us, the more intelligent you're going to be and more self-aware and more worthy of personhood. However, one of the things is, let's say we're sitting here, vast majority of our energy is going to supporting our large brains. And so animals only become intelligent in the way that aids their survival. To become intelligent in a way that doesn't aid your survival creates a liability
Sure.
and therefore reduces your chance of survival. And so all living beings only become intelligent in ways which aid their survival. And so when we look at orangutans, chimpanzees, and other self-aware persons such as elephants, when we measure them, we can't measure like for like because they're actually intelligent in different ways and in their way more intelligent than us. Yeah, and so we have to be very cautious when making these comparisons. Equally, you have to make the same precautions about comparing intelligence between human cultures
Sure.
because our brains evolve in different ways due to cultural programming of upbringing. And so if you brought up in a ghetto, yes, you may be a dunce in the classroom, but you're a genius in the rainforest. I mean, sorry, genius in the ghetto,
Yeah. Yeah.
and vice versa. And similarly, I would say, for example, orangutans may be dunces in the classroom, only intelligent 5, 6-year-old child, but geniuses in the rainforest. They have temporal spatial maps over decades, understanding where the food and resources are, which is beyond the human capacity to learn. And so they look down on us from the trees and go, how do these idiots ever survive? Because according to our values, they're the most stupidest thing we've ever come across.
Absolutely. That's a great way to say. How did you, when did you know you could make a difference? When did you know that, man, I can be the guy that helps bring this attention to the world?
Well, it's just been a journey, to achieve the vision and the outcome. Um, and and so this a skill I have is predominantly, which is allowing success, is a skill of collectivization, is to working with others, supporting others,
Yeah.
releving in others' success.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you can work selflessly and collectivize, and work with others for their success and their value, you can achieve a lot. And I would argue, folks, that humans, regardless of the positing of the child genius who's suddenly changed the world, that's not really, if you look deeply, it's not really the case. Even, if you look into the biographies of even very successful people, you can see that they've been supported all the way along by a whole community of people that without that community, they've never been able to become successful. And of course, so recognizing that as once is that, the only way we can be successful is giving up our own self-interest to a wider community and a wider cause. And to that extent, and the ability to do that has meant that the Orangutan Project and our sister projects, International Tiger, International Elephant Project, and Forest for People, have been able to achieve significant outcomes in the world.
What's been the biggest threat to the orangutan population?
Mm-hmm. Look, we've been slowly dwindling their population, for centuries, we because they're the slowest reproducing species in the world,
Okay.
because they adapt to the environment through culture, not natural selection. So they have long maternal periods with a small number of infants. So you only kill a couple of orangutans in a population a year, then the population cannot recover and will spiral to extinction. So we've been slowly reducing their range in numbers for a considerable period. But unfortunately now it's really accelerated with big multinationals destroying the rainforest for unsustainable monocultures such as palm oil, pulp paper, or even more ridiculous, digging up the rainforest for low-grade coal. And this has been really the challenge of the last 20 years. And so we only got the next few years to be able to save the last viable populations before it's too late.
And that is in Indonesia, correct?
Yeah, orangutans exist on two islands, Sumatra and Borneo. And Borneo is actually divided into two countries, Indonesia in the south and the northern part is Malaysia.
And that's the only habitat for orangutans in the world.
That's correct. And of course, now, I mean, once where, that they would have existed pretty much over the entirety of those two islands, they're really now only existing in relatively small pockets of rainforest. And they're dwindling as we speak.
What was it that led us to this point? Were they being hunted? Like, did local people hunt them, or is it simply a matter of removing their environment?
Yes, yeah, it's simply a matter of moving the environment predominantly over the last 20 years, although hunting, does play a part. And once the forest is gone, they start starving and they start raiding, let's say local villages for food and or trying to kill the young palm oil plants which replace the rainforest, and then they kill the agricultural pest. But the predominant problem is, in the main game, is to conserve the habitat. Without the habitat, they can't survive. And yeah, and that's the main game.
And you work really well with orangutans that have been illegally kept as like pets or injured, and rehabbing them. To the jungle school is one of the videos I was watching, where you're like basically teaching them how to be wild again.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start that project, and what kind of support are you getting for that?
Mm-hmm. I've started it many, many years ago, and certainly started financially supporting it, but also started bringing the orangutans I worked with in captivity back to the wild, and started reintroducing the first zoo-born orangutans back into the wild, because this is where all orangutans can only survive and thrive in a level of dignity that they deserve. And do we get enough support for rescue, rehabilitation, and release efforts, as well as our land conservation efforts? No. One of the rate determining issue that we're facing is not enough funds to achieve our outcomes. And so that's why, I do spend a lot of time writing books, doing talks, etc., because we need to somehow increase our support and
Yeah,
therefore our capacity to make meaningful change before that window of opportunity disappears over the next decade.
sure. One of the things that caught my attention was you had a reporter following you around, and you were introducing him to the various orangutans. Just upon first sight, you knew their name. How can you tell them apart like that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, look, it's just the same as we can. So, the usual thing, if you turn up into a different culture, at first you think, well, gee, pretty much everyone's starting to look alike here. But after a while, you get used to, their faces, and you go, well, of course, they're all very individual and all very different. And that's like with orangutans. So if you've been working for orangutans for 35 years, as I do, you not only recognize individuals, but you also recognize family resemblance. You go, oh, well, that's obviously her daughter because she looks like her,
Sure.
and so it's not a superpower. It's really just something which comes along with familiarity, just as we may have experienced ourselves going to different cultures.
And so talk to me about the orangutan family culture. I know they're primarily matriarch, like humans, right? The baby's really dependent upon the mom. How long is that process of being dependent on the mom, and is the dad still involved? How's that work?
Mhm. Well, dad leaves, thank God, because dad is a big fruit eating machine. And and he doesn't really add any value to the infant's raising, because
I,
they really have no natural predators.
I don't
So
want my
the best
wife to
thing.
hear that. I don't want my wife to hear that part.
So the best thing he can do is get out of there. In fact, actually, when the female orangutan is pregnant, she has a vulvar swelling, which signals for all the males to leave
Oh
and
wow.
not take up the food resources that compete for herself and the baby. So him leaving is actually a really good thing. And then she'll have the baby, and she suckles for 8 years. And
Oh
the females will stay with their mother till the 12 years old, at least, and they learn off each other and all the culture. And now two things are happening here. One is they're programming a vacant brain, which so it's very little instinct, a lot of learning over a long maternal period. So just like we have to go through a long maternal period of training to become functional in society, so orangutans have to do the same thing. But the second aspect to it is, for mental health, we need love and security from, to produce us to be confident, independent, and successful. And it's true for humans and it's true for orangutans. And orangutan mothers have the most loving, beautiful, caring environment for the offspring, where it is looked after and cared for and loved to a degree even beyond human capacity, which produces this wonderful, independent, beautiful person at the end of it. And therefore, I would say to become friends with orangutans is one of the most beautiful experiences a human being can have, because in many ways they're a more noble form of humanity.
mm. Yeah, I heard that on the video, more noble form of humanity. What so now the baby gets to 12 and it's gonna be kind of moving on to its own. Do they stay in like pods or tribes, or do they branch off?
Mhm. Well, at about 12, the young female will, after learning how to raise babies from her mother's next baby, because let's say we're talking about smart orangutans, there's 9 years between infants, she'll go off to territory next to her mother. And so all the orangutans in the area, all the female orangutans will be related. And so they live these semi-solitary lifestyles, but when there's big fruiting trees, they'll all come together and the females will eat out of the same tree and all the babies will play with each other. So similarly, for example, I would probably say, if you understand, let's say, country Americans, where they live on their own farm and they're growing their own food and they're living, yeah. But at Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving, they all come together at a big feast and everyone plays. But then they go back to their farms, yeah. And so that's how orangutans live. They live this beautiful, diverse community, and rich social lives, but I guess in slow motion, like people do in the country, rather than this city dwellers that live in the cities.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. That really makes sense to me. What's the funniest thing you've seen an orangutan do in your relationship to where you were amazed that they did that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, orangutans are, the most intelligent being that shares our planet. And now, when I've been working with orangutans, one of the amazing things to do is they all love to escape, and so if so that's a favorite pastime. And for example, I had two chimpanzees that we sent away, and the chimpanzee's been living in this enclosure for 30 years, yeah, and never escaped. The orangutans went there 2 days later. They're out wandering around. They escaped. Yeah. So they're super intelligent and figure things out. So they can pick locks. They can outsmart you, and so in all sorts of ways, they're the great thinkers.
Really?
And so we often, when we first started looking at orangutans, we start thinking, well, they actually can't be that bright. All they do is sit there and they don't do terribly much. But what they've got these large cerebral cortexes, which is basically their computer simulator, and they're thinking all the time and they're running computer simulations. So a chimpanzee, for example, will try and error to, let's say, a chimpanzee wants to escape, it'll keep trying different things and all over and active, trying to escape. and trying to figure out what works through trial and error. Whereas an orangutan would just sit there and think about it for a day, then just escape once. So yeah.
That's funny you say they think, because every time I've seen them, it really looks like they're just sitting there thinking.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. They have rich internal lives. Yeah, and don't necessarily express that. So why, when we originally started studying apes, we thought, oh, well, chimpanzees, our closest relative, they're very active and dynamic, always trying to learn. They obviously must be the smartest. But of course, we quickly found out when we studied them and got to know them a bit more that these were the quiet geniuses that were taking their time, but figuring out these wonderful problems very easily.
What was there a special orangutan that you've been the closest to over your time, and share that story with us a little bit?
I mean, there's a couple of orangutans which are close. One was Sakara, when I had the privilege of being her mother for 6 weeks. She got injured, and we had to look after her, and so I had to take her from her mum and basically care for her like a orangutan mother for 6 weeks, which was the most wonderful experience to be born a white heterosexual male and then have an experience of being a mother of an orangutan was obviously a unique and beautiful experience. And then obviously gave her back to her mum when she was well enough, and then allowed that relationship to continue. So that was a beautiful time. With Tamara, being with her from birth and then taking her all the way on a journey to be back into the wild, and then meeting up with her 3 years later after she being in the wild, and seeing that she was still doing okay. That again was a wonderful experience. Yeah.
Did she recognize you after 3 years?
Of course, orangutans would never forget you. They're obviously just like a friend. They know you for life, and they have terrific long-term memories.
And how long is their lifespan? How long does an orangutan live?
Mhm. Uh, we believe they must live into at least into the early 60s.
Oh,
Otherwise, their population wouldn't be self-sustainable. But we really haven't been studying them in a serious way for that long, and so we've yet to see that we're in the early part of the studies. And of course, unfortunately, as we've been studying them, is their populations have been dwindling and killed, and the rainforest disappearing. So it's really not, I guess, in a sense, accurate picture of how they live peacefully in their own communities, undisturbed. But certainly, yeah, certainly into the early 60s would be the situation that they would be experiencing in the wild naturally.
sure. One of my favorite moments in the show I was watching with you is one of the young orangutans went out and climbed and didn't do something well and got themselves scared and came scampering down the tree and just climbed onto you like a baby would its mom or dad. And you were talking them
Hmm.
how you have to reassure the baby that it's okay. And I think you called it like Nick or something for them to go climb again. And I can't even only imagine the bond you have with those animals in those moments.
Yeah, and I mean, not
I
literally means in Indonesia, climb, and because in Sumatra there's tigers on the ground, and one of the things we have to teach them very early on is never come to the ground, and you got to sleep in your night nest at night, otherwise you basically end up as tiger food.
yeah,
And the other aspect to it is as we know with humans, tough love doesn't work. Give him security and a secure base to explore the environment allows them to be confident and independent earlier. And so with like with a lot of things, love is the key. The more that we can support them, and give them security, that it seems counterintuitive, but it's the truth. Then the quicker they'll become independent.
wow, yeah, that's so fascinating to me, and I just can't. I want to come over there and just see what you do someday. Like it just fascinates me.
Mhm. Yeah, it's wonderful to, I do eco tours and people come into the forest with me and see all the wonderful heroes on the ground who are working with orangutans to save them. And that's a wonderful experience. Meeting the orangutans is obviously a magnificent experience. But also, there's another aspect to it is the agricultural and industrial revolutions have been too short a time period to have an evolutionary impact on human beings. So, in other words, we've adapted and feel most at home back in nature because that's where we've basically evolved, and we haven't changed significantly since then. And so going back to the rainforest with the orangutans is often a wonderful connecting experience, to in some ways for many people the first time feeling at home and connected in a way that they might not experience in the urban or the city jungles that we spend most of our time.
Yeah, absolutely. We're big proponents here of getting out in nature and reconnecting with where we came from for sure. Just reset the mind and the heart and the spirit, you know?
Hmm.
What
Yeah, no, I think that, and it's been more and more recognized, even from medical terms, where people, doctors are prescribing, you know, um, uh, going back to nature and spending time in nature as a way of increasing health outcomes. And so it's not just a ideology that we are part of nature and we need to, which is just another of the myriad of reasons why we should be saving the rainforest and our natural environment, and to feel that in any way we should are going to win by destroying the environment is surmounting to madness.
it is. No, you're 100% Leaf. It's been an honor to talk with you and to learn about your work with the Orangutan Project. Where can our listeners uh, go to support you in this amazing cause and this such a noble project, as you say, to save one of the more noble species on Earth?
Yeah, you come visit our website at theorangutanproject.org, and you can adopt an orangutan, sponsor a patch of rainforest to secure it, or give a general donation to achieve our vision and mission. And then, of course, there's opportunities there to go on eco tours and read the books that I read. I write. And so there's many ways that people can join a journey for a meaningful outcome. And one of the wonderful things about becoming part of something greater than you and giving to something greater than you is actually we actually benefit from it. To live a life of selfless service and giving to others is actually not a life of sacrifice. It's a life of reward and benefit. And so it's not divorced from personal benefit to those who can work or support a higher ideal.
Yeah, 100% is a great way to close out. Leaf, it's been an honor to talk with you, and I thank you so much for taking time to share your story with our community.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you.